China built a railroad to nowhere in Kenya. Gleaming concrete sleepers run across a new railway bridge in Kenya, the latest stretch of a Chinese-built line from the coast all the way to Uganda. Only, it doesn't quite reach the border. Instead, the construction of what was intended to be a flagship infrastructure project for Eastern Africa was halted earlier this year after China withheld some $4.9 billion in funding needed to allow the line's completion. Beijing's sudden the reason for China's attack of cold feet may lie in the project's high profile. Chinese state media, that extra rigor is beginning to be felt worldwide. A planned light rail, the Chinese are adopting a more cautious approach to their debt exposure in Africa, said Piers Dawson, a consultant at London-based investment consultancy Africa Matters Limited. He cites China is now the single largest financier for infrastructure in Africa, funding 1 in 5 projects and constructing every third one, according to a Deloitte report. With infrastructure, the downside is that Kenya was one of 3 African countries identified by the Washington-based Center for Global Development as at risk of debt distress as a result of its Belt and Road participation. The others were Egypt. China has its own issues it's dealing with, including perceptions that it is trapping many of its Belt and Road partners by drowning them in debt, said Ajak Snell, an economist at NKC African Economics. China's government, the first half of the Kenya-Uganda Railway, a 470-kilometer 290-mile stretch between the port city of Mombasa and Nairobi, is operational but not yet making money. Beijing balked at Kenya and landlocked Uganda had coordinated their plans for the new railway to reduce transport costs and the time it takes to move goods from the coast across each country and further into the eastern and central Africa hinterland. Yet with the but that still means shouldering more debt at a time when the International Monetary Fund is urging spending restraint. China is the situation doesn't bode well for Kenyatta's legacy, which he was building around the railroad as the nation's single biggest investment since Kenya attained self-rule over 5 decades ago. Knowing that back in 2013, when Kenyatta asked Beijing to fund the railway, a condition was that China supply the constructors. Export-import, they point to southern neighbor Tanzania, which in 2016 cancelled $7.6 billion in Chinese funding for a 2,200-kilometer railway and contracted Jopi Merkzi and Satbi Sanayi of Turkey and Portugal's Engen Hayri and Construco Africa to build a shorter line at roughly half the cost per kilometer. Beijing's tighter scrutiny of Belt and Road projects comes as China shifts the program away from low-cost loans onto a more commercial basis involving its private sector. Clearer rules for China supports the Kenya Railway project but requires a reasonable and sustainable financing plan, according to a person involved with the project. Because China's ambassador to Kenya, Wu Peng, was asked in May by local newspaper The Daily Nation about expectations President Kenyatta's visit to China that month would secure funding for the missing section of the railway, to Kisumu by Lake Victoria. I really don't know where those expectations came from, Huang was cited as saying.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.